Thank you so much, James, for inviting me to this talk. I would like to thank all of the speakers here. I loved listening to all of the speeches. And without wasting much time, I would share my screen. Is it visible, James?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
Yes, we can see now, yeah.
Okay, good. All right. What I would try to do is I would try to briefly contextualize the experience of Bengalis during the partition of 1947 within the framework of a larger history. I personally believe that a view towards partition can never be mono-perspective. There's a constant presence of little bits of partition in people's minds. Even though when we look at Bangladesh, there seems to be a stronger focus on the events of the Liberation War of 1971. People from both West Bengal and Bangladesh are aligned to a Bengali national identity and cling on to their own food habits and customs. I would also like to highlight upon the gradual conceptualization of the religious other that grew post-partition. The Hindus and the Muslims were not perceiving each other's identities the same way that they have been doing before, because post-partition, the way they perceived each other changed dramatically. Before that, they have been living harmoniously in various nooks and corners of South Asia. So I would also like to give a trigger warning here because I have used a couple of images which might be disturbing to some. This is how India and Bengal looked before 1947. So we can see that both East and West Bengal, they have been together. They're adjoined here, and which was not the case post-partition. The descendants of the urban migrants in Bengal record a greater sense of loss of property and business on one hand, and a deeper sense of cultural loss on the other, as their families moved from an urban milieu to the backwaters of East Bengal. Many Bengalis who had to leave everything in East Bengal and had to uproot themselves from their homeland still feel that food and festivals are better observed in Bangladesh. I have been working as a citizen historian under the 1947 Partition Archive, which is supported by the Stanford University. And I have observed while interviewing the partition witnesses, I have observed that the women respondents have had more stories to tell, especially regarding the private sphere of their lives, and their narratives were more graphic. It kind of seemed that the women were becoming the repositories of their family history. We can hardly compartmentalize stories of partition. Neither can we generalize the stories of all those who had witnessed the event. Despite the vast volume of information on partition that is available to us today, we are only just learning to view the event encompassing all its facets and countless individual narratives which are equally important. So Calcutta, since I am from West Bengal, I would like to highlight the condition in Calcutta. Calcutta was a very pristine city before partition. So all of the people who were living in Calcutta, they were vastly, they were devastated when partition struck. From the 1942, from the year 1942, people have been, experiencing changes in the economy, in the society, due to the Great Famine, which affected, it was a man-made famine, which affected Bengal. And people were suffering, there were economic crisis going on. And here in this picture, we can see the British troops in Calcutta with rifles at their ready, clearing a street after the Hindus and Muslims used firearms against each other. So there were frequent communal clashes which have been happening. This picture is from 28 August 1946. The bodies in the men thoroughfare of Calcutta after riots and disturbances, the communal riots which have been happening. There were deluge of bodies taking over empty spaces all over Calcutta, turning the pristine metropolis into a slum. Most of the most of the people who have been living in Calcutta pre-partition, they kind of, they were very upset about it, and they continued to say that this could never have happened under the British. There was orderliness and discipline under the British. The streets were washed every day, and Calcutta was a very perfect city before the coming of the refugees. So partition did transform the city of Calcutta forever. The border between two nation states of India and Pakistan was formed just a few miles outside Calcutta. The moral order of the city had collapsed post 1946 because of the famine and the riots as well. 3/4 of the city's residents were Hindu, and 1/4 was Muslim, and it's not very different from what it is today. So, but the layout was very different. The Muslim pockets in the Hindu areas and the Hindu pockets in the Muslim areas, they were present there, and people lived in harmony before, the 1940s. But post-partition, we can see that the riots and the fear of the other, the religious other, which have been, conceptualized post-partition, this wreaked havoc. And in areas like Maniktala in Calcutta, the Hindus were greater in number, and in Park Circus, the Muslims were greater in number, resulting in communal clashes there. Various newspapers reported a huge number of, human bodies thrown into the river Ganga and burnt around the clock. I would also like to, this is, I would like to mention the, yes, of Gandhi. Here we can see Gandhi touring Noakhali in 1946 as a part of his peace mission. So he was, going personally to the riot-afflicted villages, both in East and West Bengal, and this was a part of his peace mission. So he is being accompanied by his disciples here. So the interviews I took on behalf of Stanford University and Partition Archive, they left a very deep impact on me and my studies. So I would just quickly like to highlight a few interviews here. This is the interview of Mr. Dasgupta, Tapan Kumar Dasgupta. He was born in Borishal, Bangladesh, and he had to migrate to West Bengal in 1947. He was just 13. So during partition, Mr. Dasgupta's family lost their ancestral home, furniture, jewelries, and various other valuable assets. Mr. Dasgupta and his family broke down when they realized that they would not be able to call Borishal their home anymore. So most of the people who had to uproot themselves from East Bengal and come to West Bengal, they kind of felt that this is a pretty temporary thing, and they would eventually go back to their homes after a week or two, a month or two, very soon. But that hope was in vain, and they could not really go back to their homelands anymore. After several decades, they might have, gone to pay a visit to their homelands, but they could not call their homes anymore. So when I was interviewing Mr. Dasgupta, I could feel that this grief of uprooting themselves from their homelands had stayed with him till date. The second one is of Ananga Mohan Banerjee. He happens to be my grandfather. So he was born in West Bengal, and he did not migrate during partition, but he witnessed partition and the effect it had on Bengal. So here he recounts how the landowners hired the fishermen to fight on their behalf during the communal riots, using big chunks of stones and bricks stored on their terraces in preparation of the riots. The women of the household blew conch shells to spread awareness regarding the attacks in the neighborhoods. During the riots, his mentally disabled aunt had gone out of home, never to return. Mr. Banerjee's family believes that she was killed by a mob in the city during the riots. So these are the various, levels on which partition affected people, partition torn apart families, and whatnot. So this is these are stills from Meghe Dhakatara, a movie by Ritik Ghotok, which focuses on the experience of refugee women post 1947. This girl had to uproot from East Bengal and had to migrate to West Bengal along with her family. So she could not go on studying anymore. Obviously, she had to work now. She had to support her family, in whichever way it was possible. So this is basically a trilogy, three movies, chronologically focusing on the experiences of refugee families post-partition. I would also like to highlight the conceptualization of the word refugee and the figure and the image of a refugee, how it became a new addition in the vocabulary of middle-class Bengalis post-partition. A refugee was usually translated into culturally inferior, teased in schools, often physically taunted, and openly blamed for leaving everything behind and feeding on the jobs and resources of the original inhabitants of West Bengal. So the most important thing that I would like to hammer on is that the loss of homeland in case of the migrants was also accompanied by the sense of economic displacement and social insecurity. Uh, it's very difficult to talk about a subject as heavy as partition, and but if anyone wants to delve deeper into how it affected Bengal, both East and West Bengal, there is a plethora of partition literature which has been written in Bengali language and has been also translated into various other languages as well, and movies. So I have observed that nostalgia and sense of loss are the two major things that runs common through all of these. So I think we can never really get over how partition affected various parts of South Asia, and since I have talked about Bengal, how it affected Bengal, how it affected both the public and the private spheres, and how it has been reflected in the literary works, the movies. I think these are very important aspects which needs to be discussed a lot more than we are doing now. And yeah, so that's what I wanted to talk about. Thank you, James, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to share a space with all of you, and I really loved talking about it. Thank you so much.